Hi, this is Kevin Smith with the IT Transformation Institute. I hope you're enjoying the video series, and we have a doozy of a topic for you today. This is chapter 10 in our series on world-class IT service management, and we're going to be looking at change management. And change management is one of my favorite processes, and it's certainly strategic to IT service management and strategic to the IT organization, and you could make the case that it's critical to the business. Change management is an example of a process that delivers big benefits. It requires a significant commitment from the ITSM organization and from the IT organization, but it does deliver big benefits. And we'll take a look at some of those benefits and some of the detail about how we can be successful with this process, and I hope you enjoy today's segment. Our first discussion point around change management is regarding process ownership. This is a practice that I recommend for some of the key processes, is to designate a specific process owner, because if the process is important, it's important enough to do well. It's really demanding of some attention. So I recommend that we designate a process owner. This process owner is going to reinforce the discipline that's necessary to be successful with change management, and change management certainly does require a high level of discipline. And I mentioned at the top of the video that there are some compelling benefits. And one of those benefits of doing change management well is a reduction in unplanned outages. Outages have a huge impact on the business. When we lose access to a critical service or to a critical system, it has an immediate impact within the business and even onto our customers. So change management can reduce unplanned outages. It can also improve availability of our systems. These things go hand in hand. But I like to recommend a process owner. If you are doing change management today and you're being successful, then you've probably already figured that out. If you're doing change management and you're not being successful, take a look at process ownership. Pick a strong process owner, an experienced member of the ITSM team, somebody who's a good communicator, somebody who can be a good liaison, and they're really going to own this process from beginning to end and ensure that they're enforcing the structure and the discipline that's required to make this process successful.
Annabelle, where did you go? I've looked high and I've looked low. I've looked low and I've looked.
Our second discussion point on change management is the request for change itself. So this is the trigger for the process. A request for change comes in. It can come from an individual, it can come from a team, depending on how you want to structure this. But it's really important that we're consistent in what we capture in this request for change, because we are going to be evaluating this change and reviewing this change. And we face significant decisions. We've got to recognize that a change is committing the resources of the business. Now, along those lines, one of the things we have to make sure we have in this request for change are a definition of the resources, a good description of the resources that will be required, a good description of the risks that are represented by this change, and then the benefits. Now, whoever is submitting this change, be it an individual or be it an organization, a team, they have to take some responsibility for this change, because they are putting to the business, they're putting to IT a significant requirement, a significant request. They're asking for this change, or a change to systems, or a change to our infrastructure. And it is really important that that team or that individual is accountable for capturing these resource requirements, these risks, and these benefits. And we'll talk about that more as we continue to go through this process. But a good change process needs to start out well, and it begins with a complete and thoughtful request for change.
Tell me, where does the spirit go when you die? Oh, where does the spirit
Our next discussion is on reviewing the request for change. I recommend that this happens pretty quickly because we want to keep this process moving forward. We want to make this process efficient from a resource standpoint and from a time standpoint. So we want to validate that we have all the necessary information. It helps to have a good form, and you want to have a good, consistent request for change form, which makes this step a little bit easier. So we validate we have all the required information that we highlighted in the previous discussion. Then we want to identify if this is a pre-approved change, if this is an emergency change, or if this is a normal change that will go through the normal change review process. Now, all three of those categories, and some organizations may have an additional category, but for most, those three categories will work. But each of those three categories will have their own business process or workflow. So then we'll enter the workflow for a pre-approved change or an emergency change or a normal change, but we need to identify which one it is. We need to verify we have all the information we need, and then we can continue to move through the process. It's really important that this process is designed such that there are no delays. There's no waiting, there's no queuing time, because the change process by definition is requesting something that's important, and we don't want this process to take a lot of time. I've worked with organizations who's had a change process that took weeks typically, and that was far too long. And when we reduce that process and compress that process, we begin to deliver benefits to the organization more quickly. So let's move through this stage efficiently and move on to the next steps.
I have packed your satin gloves and lace.
Next discussion point is around evaluating the change itself. So normally this is going to be done by the process owner that we mentioned at the beginning of the video, or by a team, the change management team. Different members of the team can evaluate the change. But what we want to do is a number of things, but including a key part of this is a risk assessment. Risk is a very, very key part of the change management process. We want the change to be successful. We want to ensure that we have a very high change success rate. That is a key metric for the change management process. I've mentioned that, so I'll say that the standard for change success is 98%. World-class change management is at 98% or higher, and it's an important metric to track. So we want to do that risk assessment. We have the information on the change request that we mentioned earlier that includes the risks, the resources required, and the benefits. So we want to perform this risk assessment and prepare the request for change to go to the CAB. Assuming emergency changes are in a different workflow, but let's assume a normal change and it's going to go through the review process. It's going to go before the CAB for consideration. We want to make sure that we are making the best use of the CAB's time. We have a thorough and thoughtful change request process, change consideration process. So we need to prepare that change request for the CAB, so when we're in the CAB meeting and we're working through the CAB agenda, we don't have any needs to go back and acquire additional information. So this is a kind of a feedback cycle, and when we go through the CAB, we can determine, once we've done a number of those, we can determine if there are pieces of information missing and be particularly careful to ensure that they're available. So we've done the risk assessment, we've prepared the package for the CAB, and then we move on to the next step.
All the pictures of your pretty face, and I kept the ones of you on scale.
Okay, we move on to the next step, which is the need to approve or deny the change. Now, again, we're assuming a normal change. The change request is going to go before the CAB. So we have a standing CAB agenda. We could talk about that. Now, we could probably make a whole video just on CAB meetings and the CAB agenda, but for the purposes of today, we're just going to spend a couple of minutes on it. So the request goes to the CAB. It's part of the standard agenda. We've prepared the package for the change request. For major changes or significant changes, I recommend that the individual or the team that is requesting the change, they come to the CAB, and it's an interactive discussion. CAB members are likely going to have questions. We should have a lively debate in many cases. I really recommend that because, again, the CAB and the change process are effectively stewards of the business, and we're committing the resources of the business if we are to implement this change. So the CAB meeting itself and the change review needs to set a very high standard. It's very important that we take this seriously. And any people requesting a change need to understand that they are going to be accountable. They're going to be accountable for the change request. They're going to be recognized for the benefits that we receive, but they're also going to be accountable if the change is not successful. So when we enter into this process, everybody involved should understand the whole process will be held to a very high standard. So we have CAB members. I recommend that this is a cross-functional team representing major elements of IT as well as a CAB executive sponsor. There's a standing agenda. We're very efficient and very respectful of people's time. And there's a voting process. It's possible now that we can automate part of this process. One of the biggest potential delays in the change approval process is waiting on approvals. While we need to have secondary approvals, we need to have a clock that is effectively monitoring how long it takes for that voting process to occur. And I also recommend we keep a voting record of each member of the CAB. Again, because we're holding everybody accountable. CAB assignments can sometimes be rotating assignments. A member spends 6 months or a year. You can determine what the right amount of time is on the CAB, but it is very important that it's a strong cross-functional team made up of strong thinkers, because we are thoughtfully considering each change request and determining if it is worthy of an approval or if it's going to be denied, require more information and go through the process again, whatever the case may be. So ultimately, we need to make sure the CAB can be at its very best in considering these change requests and then what will go forward to implementation.
And a picture from your wedding day.
The next discussion is around assuming a approval from the CAB, we move forward and update our IT plans. So the plan is going to be updated. An important part of that plan is the change calendar. We have a change calendar that lays out when changes are going to occur. It normally includes change windows, approved segments of time, windows of time during the week in which we implement changes. Now, sometimes those can be Friday evenings, they can be Saturday mornings. We'll sometimes have emergency change windows that can be reserved for the middle of the week, something like a Wednesday evening. It varies from business to business, but that model is pretty consistent and works for most organizations, for most IT organizations. So we're going to have the change calendar. We'll get the approved change on the calendar. We'll slot a time at which the change is going to be implemented. And there are some elements, some considerations that are really important in the implementation. We want the change team and the change owner to work with the implementation team to ensure that we have a success. And we want to ensure that we have a test plan, which is testing that's going to occur before the change is implemented. We want to ensure we have a remediation plan in the event that it's necessary to back out the change or remediate the change. We need to have that in place in advance. Now, it's often possible to have a set of established and accepted remediation plans, and they can be used across a number of change implementations. But it's really important. The main thing here is it's important there is a remediation plan, because if we have to back the change out, we can't go try to figure out the backup process at that time, the backup process at that time. It already has to be defined and proven. And then ultimately we need a communication plan. So we're going to be communicating the change. We're going to be giving the organization a heads up that this change is happening. And so nobody is surprised. Everybody understands exactly what to expect. And when we have the combination of a good test plan, which is testing ahead of implementing the change, a remediation plan in the unlikely event we hope that we should have to back out the change, and an effective communication plan, it significantly improves our chances of being successful. And again, that's what this is all about, is implementing the right changes and ensuring when we do them, when we implement an approved change, that it is successful and we begin to reap those benefits.
Are you kissing the starry birds in the sky? Will you come and visit us down?
Well, I hope today's discussion on change management has helped. And we could spend a lot more time on this, but I wanted to keep this as an overview. I have a lot more detail on change management in our book on world-class IT service management and in our training classes. But clearly, world-class IT service management demands strong change management. We simply can't be great at ITSM without strong change management. And I encourage people and urge people to be reminded of the fact that change management is a journey. You really never stop learning on change management. We never stop getting better. We continue to improve the process. We continue to recognize how we can get a little bit better in many of these areas. And I hope those discussion points have given you some awareness of how we can approach change management to be successful. And if you are operating a change management process today, I hope we've given you one or two ideas on how to make that process better. So please take advantage of our resources on the website. The website address is shown on the first and last slide of these videos. I have a process diagram after the first or second discussion point today that can be used as a bit of a roadmap, as a business process model. And take advantage of our training. We have virtual online training, and that is instructor-led. And we have on-site, in-person instructor-led training as well. And we have consulting offerings that include an evaluation of your change management process, or in working with you and coaching you on improving your change management process, or how to stand up for the first time a change management process. So I hope those resources are helpful. And as always, we love to hear from you. Use the contact form. We can talk to you. I'd love to come and see you and take a look at your operation and do anything we can to help you on this wonderful journey of change management, and also on the wonderful journey of world-class ITSM. We know you're busy, and as always, thanks for listening, and let's make IT great.
Annabelle, Annabelle, are you free? Will you wrap me in your legacy? In a blanket with your sweet perfume.